Hickok 45 here. Were you armed in 1988? Well, you might have been 2 years old, so not a possibility. Well, hopefully you've seen our video, Armed in 1876. Well, over 100 years later, we're looking now, today, at what someone might have chosen, might have been carrying or owned in 1988. All right, we choose a pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle from these specific years, and that's what we're looking at. So in 1988, the three we've chosen that we might have chosen in 1988, so might have you, and of course lots of possibilities, would have been a Mossberg 500, right? There's a lot of variations of it. This is a, what is this, like an AT, and a Glock 17. Hey, imagine that. In 1988, you might have chosen that. Or an AR-15A2, like I have on the table. It's got some A1 parts. You've seen it before, I hope, okay? And these are just an example of what you might have chosen if you were an adult and, you know, wanted each of these firearms, right? Shotgun, rifle, pistol, kind of what we think of. If you don't have anything else, you might want a good rifle, a good shotgun, a good handgun. Yeah, it's kind of the way that goes. So let's look at these three. But first, let's look at 1988. Now, some of you were just barely alive. Oh, no, wait a minute. What's that mean, barely alive? You were really young, is what I meant by that. What was going on in 1988? Well, lots of things as usual, right? NASA had just resumed shuttle flights. George H.W. Bush had just been elected. A lot of people were playing Nintendo. Oh, guess what? The Washington Redskins won Super Bowl 22, I guess. Yeah, I think they were a different team maybe than they are this year. Some movies, Rain Man, Die Hard, Young Guns, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think Iran-Contra was big in the news. Yeah, I remember all that. You know, many of you do too. Just a lot of stuff going on, you know, from 1988, and a lot of people shooting in a different time. And then I've always thought it'd be interesting to travel through time, like we all have, right? And whatever your hobby is, but it would be so cool to go back into gun shops, you know, in these years and just see what people are talking about, what's on the shelf, and that's a little bit of what we're doing. Again, just a possible choice. You could mention 100 different firearms at least that in 1988 you would have chosen over this, over that, or over that. Okay, so who would choose these crazy? So anyway, let's. What do you want to start with? I'll let you all decide. Okay. Okay, I see all of you pointing at the shotgun. All right. Well, I'm not going to bore you with the entire history of these firearms. We have videos on all these firearms, and maybe several, you know, so to speak. So we want to focus kind of on the year, a little bit on the history. But these are three firearms that you might have chosen if you were of age in 1988 and you were looking for just a good old defensive shotgun. This would kind of fall under defensive shotgun, wouldn't it? With a longer barrel, it would be maybe a hunting shotgun, because the Mossberg 500 was pretty popular shotgun, still is, isn't it? It's just one of those good old shotguns, pretty reliable. When they came out, I think in 1960, they were fairly inexpensive. They still are, you know, compared with some shotguns, and just durable, reliable. I think they came out with just one slide rail. I think Remington still had the patent on that, but 10 years later they added the double slide rail, which was better. And some people still make fun of them because of the alloy receiver, but they're really well made. They've got they lock into that big notch up there on top of the barrel. See, that's the barrel extension, and so the bolt locks into that, which is all steel locking up the steel. I always point that out, just to remind the trolls that want to hate on these because they have an alloy receiver, just like the Benelli and some other fine guns. But anyway, 1960, I think these came about. Been around forever. Good, inexpensive choice. A lot of people choose them, so they've been a natural, you know. Obviously, there's the 870, other firearms, other shotguns, but this would have been a very logical choice. Okay, in fact, it's one that I chose. I had one, but I had mostly 870 at the time that I shot. I think I bought a Mossberg 500 right about that time. This is John, and nice old gun. Not all that expensive. This, I think, was an old police cut down, maybe, or who knows. Let's just shoot the thing. Good old Mossberg. Yep, Mossberg. Where did I see it? Yeah, 500 AT. It's got the rib barrel. Okay. Thumb safety, right there. Just racked out a live round, and that doesn't matter. What should we shoot? How about that? How about one of those? Wow, what a show. Let's shoot this target over here with a shotgun. Maybe we'll shoot that target with everything one time. Boom! So, you see what a shotgun does, of course, and why most people have one. They're very, very effective. They're not all that expensive. Good old pump shotgun. So that would be a logical choice, a viable choice, pretty smart choice. 1988 for your shotgun, especially a defensive shot or a hunting gun, you know, with a longer barrel. A lot of people made that choice, okay? So, pretty cool. The old Mossberg. I don't know what else to say about it. They're just famous for being reliable, not all that expensive, come in all sorts of configurations and barrel lengths. You can shake the barrel, they're easy to take apart. And so that's why in 1988, a lot of people would have had one. No kidding. And in fact, I think my 590 I bought A1 is either around then or soon after. Actually, I might have owned it at the time, so it was a choice I had made, you know, there too. Mossberg 500 series, you know, variation of the 500. All right, handgun. Well, imagine that. A Glock 17 is something people would have chosen. Now, the Glock had not the penetration, the market saturation that it has now, or even had 5 years later. But in '88, it had been around long enough. I had owned one, Glock 17. A couple of them by then, and you know, so that would have been a viable choice. A lot of people were choosing it at that time. It had proven, the reputation was just really getting strong by that time, and how reliable they were. That's what got me. I was standing right here. A fellow I knew was into them before I was, and he brought one over a couple of different times, and we shot it here. That would have been maybe '87, '88, and I finally became impressed with it enough that I wanted one. Okay, well, I was carrying mainly a 1911, okay, or a revolver at the time. I think maybe my high power, Browning high power or something. And I just, wow, that thing just keeps on going. It doesn't know how to malfunction, does it? And then I finally had to have one. So I ended up with a couple of these, that same vintage. This is a Gen 2, which came out in '88. And, but, you know, not a lot of difference between the Gen 2 and the 1. They changed the serrations and, you know, checkering on the grip. And they start putting the serial number, I think, up under there on the frame. What else? They changed the recoil spring a little bit. And I think even the mag, this is a newer magazine, but maybe the mag base a little bit. So there were a few changes, tweaks, but not dramatic, as in, well, none of the changes have been too dramatic. So that would have been a choice that a lot of people made in 1988, okay? Just to give you a little history lesson, you know, the Glocks they came about in early 80s, like 1980, 81, 82, 83, you know, across the big water mainly. I think it was, in this country, it was like 84, 85 before you started seeing them at all, maybe. And then after mid-80s, they started taking off, okay? And so by '88, it would have been a choice that a lot of people were beginning to make, right? Including me. I was one of them. I chose the 9mm Glock over the 40, and over the in 1988 over the 45 and the 40. I can't remember the exact reason. Oh yeah, I do. Those didn't exist. Aren't I hilarious? The Glock 17 was the only Glock for you know, most of that decade. Okay, so if you said Glock, guess what you're talking about? This gun, the Glock 17, this side, this gun, 9mm. Okay, and then the Glock 19 coming out, and then the Glock 40 and all that, and what, 89 or 90, 91, and through that time period, then all the other, the 45s, Glock 21, that it took off. But the Glock 17 was it for a long time, and big deal, and a lot of people were going to it because, let's load it, shoot a bit, because, well, the reliability was catching on, even though it was ugly, and everybody wanted to hate it, and even, you know, especially gun people like myself, it's just, you know, who kind of were fond of good old revolvers, Colt, Smith & Wesson, 1911s, you know, real guns. And it was this strictly the function. It's strictly the function. I've always had a lot of appreciation for things that work well. Just they work, even if they're ugly. I used to drive those old boxy Volvos back in the 80s, and a lot of people thought those were ugly. You know me, I even had a Honda Element, but they all worked and were real practical, and so that's kind of, you know, what drew me to the Glock. The darn things are ugly. They feel a little bit weird, but man, they go bang every time, with very few exceptions. Now the trigger on these is horrible back in '88. Okay, but they shoot. Let's put 1 or 2 on this target. But I bet they work. This one has a really horrible, mushy trigger. John would ask me if that's the way they all were back then. I think they kind of were, even though it feels worse than I remember. But they've improved over the years to the point where now a lot of Glock, pull out my Glock 43 and my 19s, and they've got a fairly nice, crisp trigger, believe it or not, for a Glock at least. And they are miles beyond these old triggers. Okay, so but anyway, even though they have a bad trigger, I wanted to try to redeem myself a little bit. Even with a bad trigger, if you shoot a little bit, you can kind of get used to that, okay? And do it well. That's what we all did. We just sort of lived with it. And so that was a big deal in that time period. And also, like I say, that was they were still relatively new. A lot of controversy around them. Of course, you know, all the business about going through airport scanners and that kind of thing. The gun banners, you know, they just love to jump on anything, and so that was, oh wow, the capacity scared them, you can imagine. And then, oh, it's a plastic gun, and a lot of you were alive during those years, and you are of age, and you remember that. So there was a lot of controversy, and it sold more Glocks as usual than you can imagine. You know, the capacity, the novelty of it, and it began to show up in movies, and so. Yeah, for all those reasons, it got so much free publicity, and so it helped launch it. It really did. So pretty cool gun. It also, one other thing on this, again, one advantage of being an ugly old guy, I kind of give you some history from my brain that I remember, not that I read. When this came out, also it kind of accelerated that, I think, the 9mm versus 45 debate. You know, because that had always existed. I guess people, you know, from the time of the high power and some of the popular 9mm handguns, you know, people sat around gun shops and everywhere. I don't know about coffee shops, not at Starbucks, but, you know, back when in the day, and argued about which was better, 9mm or 45 and all that kind of thing. 38 and 45, 38 special or 45, revolver versus automatic. Oh, those old arguments that were fun. They weren't as complex at the time. There weren't as many choices. But so many people were drawn to this because of 17 rounds. That was a big deal, even though it was 9mm. So I think it got more people thinking 9mm. Well, maybe I can live with 9mm. And the bullet technology was not where it is today on defensive ammo. And so a lot of people were buying these, and so that even amplified the arguments, I think, about the 45 versus, you know, 9mm, you know, and the automatic, semi-automatic handgun. So interesting times, and we've gotten over a lot of that, but not all of it, have we? So viable choice. You might have chosen something else, and I might have, and we might have chosen a lot of different things, right? And then, of course, we got the good old AR-15 for a rifle. Could have been yeah, good old lever action you might have chosen. Could have been anything in terms of a rifle. But in 1988, you know, these were around, and this was the only one in the gun shop when I bought this. I bought this in like at the end of '83 or early '84, and it's a transition gun. You got kind of an A1 handle here in sight and all that, but it's an A2. But Colt and most gun makers, they use their parts, and so they come out with a new model. They're not going to just throw away all the old whatever bolts, receivers, and so that's typical of any firearm, whether it's a 1911 or whatever it might be. So this was a choice that a lot of you might have made. A lot of you, even if you're 20 years old right now, if you've been alive in 1988, this might have been a choice you would have made. A lot of you probably think you would have, for sure. Oh yeah, of course I'd want the AR at the time. But then again, that wasn't as much a part of everybody's consciousness or their collections in that time period. Believe it or not, I was a little bit, I don't know how to say, I was not innovative necessarily, but I was not afraid of the new firearms, obviously, because I got into Glocks early too, and I thought these were kind of cool, and I knew this is what the military used. And I had one on my radar, and so again, early '80s, I saw it, and I traded actually a couple of guns for it. I remember the gun shop and where it was on the rack, and I thought, you know what, I need one of those. And I was not living here. I know the place. I had 5 acres, and I took that thing home and shot it, and I still have it. You notice? So this would have been a gun that a lot of people would have chosen. Let's take a couple shots with it. Well, I hate to get it dirty again. Yeah, how about another red plate? And on the right, a couple for him. And this paper target. Oh, let's smoke a little pot first. And that's good enough. I think it's smooth. 1980s, you know. So in '88, that would have been a firearm. And of course, you notice if you're, I don't know, if you're brand new to firearms, you haven't even seen that many videos on anything, you notice this is a longer gun, the A2. The long forend and everything, it's kind of, it looks like a musket, you know, some people call it. That was the gun, that was the AR. If you bought an AR-15 in the 80s, you know, the A2, I think the M16 A2 came out around 1980, long in there. And then the civilian version, the AR-15, you know, the A2 was a few years after that. Like I said, I got this in '83, '84, transition. And so through the 80s, this is kind of what they looked like, you know. This is not exactly like an M4, is it? But they shot well, had plenty long length on the barrel. And I have always liked it. It's every time we bring it out, we just enjoy shooting that thing. So old AR, A2. And you know, again, in terms of history and the times, this was really, like when we see these now, we can't help but have the controversy, you know, come to mind, you know, and how the gun banners hate them. You know, the freedom haters just hate the fact that we own these things, right? In '88, that was prior to the like one of the first highly publicized crazies that got a hold of the firearm. The Stockton schoolyard shooting was in '89. And that's the first one I remember where, you know, the gun banners, you know, were using things like that to try to limit rifles. Okay, and that's all it takes is one incident. You know, I'm looking at my Kawasaki Mule. If someone drives through a crowd with one of those tomorrow, all right, there we go. We've got to watch these four-wheelers. They're dangerous things. Keep them out of the hands of people. So that was the first time. So this was pre that, was my point. So when I bought this, when I walked in and looked at this in the shop, it was just kind of a different feel about this kind of thing. I was just thinking, well, that's kind of cool. It's kind of like what the military carries, so a civilian version of it. And I think I want one of those things. There wasn't this controversy surrounding it. Oh, I better get that now while I can. I better buy some extra mags for it and some extra ammo because it's attempting to be banned or anything like that. So that wasn't a part of the consciousness. So in 1988. So So that's what a choice would have been if you like that sort of rifle versus a lever gun or whatever. That's what you'd have picked up in 1988. And these three choices would have been, I think, all really good choices. You know, obviously they could have been totally different. You know, could have been an 870, a Browning high power, or a Smith & Wesson, or something else, and a lever gun, or some other kind of semi-automatic rifle. But these would have been viable choices. In fact, like I said, I had a Mossberg, not this specific firearm, but I had those specific firearms, this actual firearm, and I had a couple of these babies. And so these were choices I did make. This is not about me necessarily. It's about what anybody might have chosen, okay? And I had some other firearms. So, 1988, interesting times. It was before a lot of the craziness and the pressure. The pressure during 88 was more, believe it or not, on handguns. You know, the little North American Derringer I've got, I remember buying that partly for that reason. So, you know, and a snub nose. If I ever want a snub nose revolver or something little, I better get it, because that's what they were all after at that time. Those were the devil, you know. So they keep changing the devil around, giving it a different name, but those were the devil at that time, not these. So 1988, very good year. What else happened in '88? I don't know. Oh, I know. The fellow holding the camera was born. Yeah. So he didn't make a lot of choices. He was just born that year, John was, so I didn't let him make many firearms choices for at least that first year. I made him wait a couple of years before I let him do that. So anyway, hope that's semi-interesting to you. Armed in 1988, three viable choices. You might have a lot different. Hey, share. You know, share in the comments if you were around buying guns, making choices like this in 1988. What did you choose? You know, or if you were not buying guns in 1988 because you were a little bitty baby like John, what do you think you would have chosen in 1988 if you were buying, you know, firearms for, I don't know, plinking or for defense or, you know, whatever. So glad you came around. It's been good to have you, because I would have hated to stand out here and talk about all this stuff and, you know, and you not be here. And I just realized I forgot to show you this box. John probably did, but that's what the Glocks came in at the time. You know, for a long time, that was a Glock box. Tupperware. So, yeah, it just caught me. Yeah, so, yeah, hey, you know, we're not too slick. You know, I might decide to talk about that tree before I even let you go. No, glad you came by. Appreciate you supporting the people that support us. You know who they are. They help us a great deal. You all help us a great deal by showing up. You show up right at the perfect time, too, when we're doing the video. I've noticed that. Your timing is excellent. You're here at the beginning, and, you know, on the day we're doing it, it's perfect. So, life is good.
Oh, yeah, that's better. This is a great gun for defense. Oh, hey, didn't see you guys there. While I've got you here, I want to remind you of our friends over at Talon Grips and Ballistol. Talon Grips makes grips, can you believe it, for all different types of firearms. You can get rough texture or more of a rubberized texture. It just sticks right on there. You know, really affordable, really cool option to improve the grip for your handguns or rifles. So please check them out at talongungrips.com. You'll be glad you did. And also Ballistol. Dad has been using Ballistol for many years. It's a cleaner and a lubricant, and it's non-toxic. It works really great, and we're happy to have them on board since it's been a part of our shooting endeavor for a very long time. So go to ballistol.com, talongungrips.com, and also while you're out there, I'm juggling all these things here. Also, while you're on the internet, please do check out our other social media like Hickok45 on Facebook. There's also Hickok45 on Twitter, The Real Hickok45 on Instagram. There's a John_Hickok45 on Instagram where I do some things. There's Hickok45.com. You can find us also on Gunstreamer. So check out all that stuff and then watch more videos.